My family banned my cousin from family events after she got pregnant at 18. When she tried to warn them about my uncle-in-law, my mom told her to stop projecting your bad choices onto good men. That was 8 months ago. Yesterday, she found photos in her husband's drawer, and now she won't stop calling my cousin to apologize. I was 17 when my cousin Maya showed up to Thanksgiving after 2 years of no contact. The dining room went silent. You could hear Grandma's oxygen tank wheezing in the corner. Well, if it isn't the girl who threw away her chance at Harvard and got pregnant at 18, Aunt Carmen hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. I tried walking over to help with her diaper bag, but Mom's hand clamped on my shoulder. She made her choice, Emma. Don't normalize teenage pregnancy. Over the next few months, I watched Maya navigate family events like a ghost. She'd take 2 buses to get there because nobody would pick her up. The family's prized valedictorian now ate alone at Easter dinner, bouncing her son while everyone else sat around the formal table discussing MCAT scores. Uncle Tony mentioned once how they'd offered to get rid of the situation when she first got pregnant. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Maya just kept her head down, spooning homemade sweet potato puree into her son's mouth. She'd made it from scratch because he had allergies nobody bothered to remember. When cousin Brian forgot his insulin at Lunar New Year dinner, Maya was the only one who noticed his hands shaking. Everything changed at the Christmas party. I escaped to the garage freezer for ice, needing a break from hammered relatives asking about my SAT scores. I put in AirPods and hit my Mango Jewel, trying my best to give myself a nicotine high before going back. I had just taken out my AirPods when I saw Marcos behind me, tatted, jacked, and 6'3". He was Jackie's husband, the one who always made jokes that weren't quite jokes. Looking grown up, Emma. His breath reeked of vodka. He backed me against the freezer, hand reaching for my thigh. I've been watching you grow up. Worth a wait. Marcos, kitchen, now. Maya stood in the doorway like a guardian angel. Her voice could have cut glass. It was the first time I'd ever seen Marcos look scared. Actually scared. He stumbled away, muttering about checking on Jackie. Maya did breathing exercises with me until my hands stopped shaking. You okay? That's all she said. No lecture about being careful. No, I told you so. Just steady presence until I could breathe again. I dragged her over to my parents. I was still shaky, but I trusted them. Maya spoke for me. Marcos isn't a good man. She's making shut up because she's jealous, Jackie interrupted. We were so panicked that we didn't even see Jackie standing right behind them. They automatically believed her. You see, Jackie was a detective, solved 3 cold cases last year. Her word was law in our family. Mom immediately deferred. Jackie would know if her own husband was dangerous. Maya, stop projecting your bad choices onto good men. Dad chimed in. Maybe if you hadn't been so loose, you wouldn't see predators everywhere. They made Maya apologize to Marcos for slandering him. The whole time Marcos stood there with a smirk on his face, staring at my chest and winking when no one was looking. I wanted to talk to Maya about it, but she had gone completely MIA. So instead, I spent the next few days at my friend's house trying to process what had happened. I was fast asleep at 3 a.m. when our family group chat went nuclear. Someone sent screenshots of Maya on escort sites with her face clearly visible. This is who's around our children, Uncle Tony wrote. The photos were obviously fake. The tattoo on her shoulder was backwards, like someone had flipped the image, but nobody cared. They voted to ban her from all family events. My mom promised to contact CPS about her lifestyle choices. Aunt Carmen celebrated at dim sum the next day. Well, I had Maya's location on Snap Maps, so the next morning I drove to her apartment with a jar of fresh sweet potato, not knowing what to expect. The door was already slightly open, so I let myself in. She was in her apartment, throwing clothes into garbage bags. Her son was at daycare. They're going to take him, she kept saying. I've worked so fucking hard and they're going to take my baby. I held her while she shook. You're the only one who's ever been kind to us, she whispered into my shoulder. Why don't you get the father to pay child support? I asked. I knew it was a stupid question, but I didn't know what else to say. She pulled away from me, her eyes completely numb with pain. Marcos is his father. My heart dropped. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of Maya's kitchen counter, trying to process what she'd just told me. Marcos, Jackie's husband, the man who'd cornered me in the garage just days ago. Maya's hands trembled as she zipped another garbage bag. She moved mechanically, folding her son's tiny shirts with the precision of someone who'd learned to function through trauma. I watched her pack a dinosaur onesie, the same one her son had worn to Easter dinner while the family ignored them both. My phone buzzed, Mom texting to ask where I was. I ignored it and helped Maya carry bags to her hit-up Honda. The apartment complex parking lot was empty except for a few cars with expired tags. Maya loaded the trunk methodically, fitting everything like Tetris pieces. She showed me her phone while we worked, screenshots of messages from Marcos dating back months, threats disguised as concern. Jackie's working late tonight. Your mom seems stressed. Maybe I should check on her. Each message more menacing than the last. The most recent one from yesterday. Accidents happen, especially to single mothers who don't know their place. We drove to her mother's house in silence. Maya's mom lived 40 minutes away in a neighborhood where houses had bars on the windows. She answered the door in her hospital scrubs, took one look at Maya's face, and pulled us inside without questions. While Maya explained everything in rapid Korean, I sat on the plastic-covered couch and tried to make sense of the timeline. Maya had been 15 at Jana's quinceañera, the party everyone still talked about because of the mariachi band that played until 2 a.m. I remembered seeing photos on Facebook. Maya in a purple dress, looking uncomfortable next to Jackie and Marcos. That was 3 years before she got pregnant. 3 years before Harvard became a memory. Maya's mom made us tea while Maya showed her the messages. Her mother's face went through stages. Confusion, recognition, then a rage so quiet it made the air feel heavy. She picked up her phone and started making calls in Korean. I caught fragments. Lawyer, cousin who worked at a women's shelter, someone who could watch Maya's son. My phone rang again. Dad this time. I finally answered. He demanded I come home immediately. Mom had seen my car on Maya's Snapchat story. They were concerned about my judgment. I told him I'd be home later and hung up before he could respond. Maya pulled out a folder from one of the garbage bags. Inside were printed emails, text messages, photos, evidence she'd been collecting for 2 years. Marcos had been careful, but not careful enough. There were messages from when she was 16, 17, always pushing boundaries, always when Jackie was conveniently absent. The doorbell rang. We all froze. Maya's mom peered through the peephole, then relaxed. It was Stephanie, Maya's best friend from high school, the one who'd been at Jana's quinceañera. She hugged Maya tight, then turned to me with eyes that had seen too much. Stephanie had brought her laptop. She'd saved everything from that night. Instagram stories, Snapchat memories, tagged photos. We sat around the kitchen table going through them timestamp by timestamp. There was Maya at 10 p.m. laughing with cousins. At 11:30 p.m. she was in the background of someone's selfie, heading toward the elevator with Marcos behind her. The next photo was at 1 a.m. Maya nowhere to be found. Marcos back at the bar with Jackie. I found myself doing math I didn't want to do. Maya's son was born in January. Count back 9 months. April. 1 week after Jana's quinceañera. Stephanie pulled up more photos. Jackie passed out at a table, surrounded by empty shot glasses. She'd been the drunkest anyone had ever seen her. Now it made sense. Create an alibi. Let your husband hunt. Maya's mom had been making more calls. A friend from church who worked at a bank would help Maya open a new account. Another friend had a cousin who rented apartments without credit checks. The Korean community phone tree was activating, creating a safety net our family had deliberately torn. I helped Maya set up a new email account, new social media profiles. We changed her passwords, enabled two-factor authentication on everything. Stephanie knew someone who could check if tracking apps were installed on Maya's phone. Every step felt like preparing for war. The escort photos were still spreading through our family group chat. Uncle Tony had forwarded them to extended family, adding commentary about protecting the children. Aunt Carmen posted about being vindicated in her suspicions. Not one person questioned why the photos had appeared immediately after Maya tried to protect me. Maya's son's daycare called. They'd received an anonymous tip about her being an unfit mother. Someone had sent them the fake photos. Maya's hands shook as she explained the situation. The daycare director, who'd known Maya for 2 years, said she'd document the harassment but had to follow protocol and notify child services. I thought about Jackie's connections. 3 cold cases solved. Commendations from the mayor. Friends throughout the police department, child services, family court. The system that should protect victims was weaponized against them. Stephanie had been at more family events than I realized. She pulled up photos from birthdays, graduations, holiday parties. In every one, the pattern was there. Marcos hovering near teenage cousins, Jackie conveniently hammered or absent, the adults laughing at his European way of greeting with kisses on both cheeks, even when the girls looked uncomfortable. Maya's mom returned from her bedroom with a box. Inside were Maya's old diaries, report cards, Harvard acceptance letter, everything from before. She'd saved it all, waiting for her daughter to come back. Now she understood why Maya had stayed away. I texted my parents that I was safe but wouldn't be home for dinner. The responses came fast and angry. Dad threatened to take my car. Mom said she was calling Maya's landlord about the illegal activities. They'd chosen their side without ever asking for the truth. Maya showed me another message from Marcos, sent an hour ago. Your mom's house has such an old electrical system. Would be a shame if something sparked. We called 911. The operator took the information but said without immediate danger. They couldn't do much. Threats had to be credible and specific. Maya laughed bitterly. The system working exactly as designed. Stephanie's boyfriend arrived with a security camera he'd bought. We installed it facing Maya's mom's front door, connected it to cloud storage, small protections against large threats. Maya's mom called her brother to come stay for a few days. He lived 2 hours away but said he'd leave immediately. I thought about Christmas dinner, how Marcos had known exactly where to find me, how he'd waited until I was alone, how many other girls had been cornered in garages, bedrooms, empty hallways, how many had tried to tell someone only to be silenced by Jackie's badge and our family's willful blindness. Maya's phone rang. Her landlord. Someone had called claiming she was running illegal activities from the apartment. He was starting eviction proceedings. She had 30 days. The timeline was accelerating. I helped Maya draft emails to legal aid organizations while her mom cooked dinner. The smell of kimchi stew filled the kitchen. Normal domesticity against extraordinary circumstances. Maya's son would be done with daycare soon. Another timeline ticking. Stephanie had been researching. She found 3 other girls who'd left our extended social circle abruptly. One moved states. Another transferred schools senior year. The third stopped coming to family events entirely. All within Marcos's orbit. All during times when Jackie was building her career, working long hours, drinking heavily at social events. Maya's mom's brother arrived as we were finishing dinner. Former military, now a contractor. He assessed the house like a security expert, checking locks, windows, sight lines. He'd brought tools to install better deadbolts, motion sensor lights, the house transforming into a fortress. My phone had 60 missed calls. The family group chat was planning an intervention for my destructive behavior. Grandma had been told I was corrupted by bad influences, the narrative solidifying with each passing hour. Maya showed me her son's birth certificate. Father, unknown. A choice that had cost her everything but protected her son from custody claims. Now Marcos was trying to weaponize even that, having his friend threaten to claim paternity. The friend who'd been at Jana's quinceañera, who'd taken photos all night, who'd provided Marcos an alibi. I realized I had to go home eventually, face the storm, but not yet. Not until Maya was somewhere safe. Not until we'd done everything possible to protect her and her son from the man our family insisted on protecting. Stephanie pulled up one last photo from Jana's quinceañera, a group shot near midnight. Maya wasn't in it, but in the background, barely visible, was a hotel room door closing. Room 237, Marcos's room. The timestamp was 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes after Maya had entered the elevator with him following. Everything after that was aftermath. I sat in my car outside the school pickup line, watching Marcos's truck pull up behind my mom's SUV. My stomach dropped. He got out and walked over to her window, all smiles and concerned gestures. I watched him lean in, speaking earnestly while Mom nodded along. His hand rested on her car door, casual but possessive. When he glanced around, his eyes found mine through through the windshield. The smile never left his face. Mom waved me over after he left. She explained how worried Marcos was about my mental health, how he'd recommended a therapist who specialized in troubled teens. Dr. Robart, she said, had helped other kids in our family. I recognized the name immediately. Jackie had mentioned him at Thanksgiving, the one who'd helped her nephew after he'd started acting out. The same nephew who'd abruptly stopped coming to family events last year. My chemistry teacher, Ms. Kim, noticed me spacing out during lab the next day. She didn't push when I mumbled about family stuff, just handed me a note with her personal number, saying sometimes students needed someone outside the situation to talk to. I pocketed it, wondering if she'd noticed the dark circles under my eyes, or the way I'd been checking my phone obsessively for updates from Maya. The eviction notice arrived at Maya's apartment that afternoon. I was there helping her pack more boxes when the landlord slipped it under the door. 30 days to vacate due to multiple neighbor complaints about illegal activities. Maya picked it up with shaking hands, and I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The handwriting on the anonymous complaint letter attached looked exactly like the grocery lists Marcos used to write for family barbecues. Stephanie's mom called that evening with a memory that had been bothering her. She'd been chaperoning at Gianna's quinceañera, remembered seeing Maya in the hotel hallway around midnight looking disheveled and crying. She'd been heading toward Marcos's room. Stephanie's mom remembered because she'd thought it odd that Maya would go to him instead of finding Jackie or another woman. But then Jackie had appeared, hammered and laughing, pulling Maya away before Stephanie's mom could intervene. My boyfriend's parents suddenly forbade him from seeing me. His mom called mine, explaining that Jackie had visited them about my unstable family situation and how I was being influenced by dangerous people. She didn't want her son's college prospects affected by association. Mom tried to defend me, but I could see doubt creeping into her eyes as she hung up. Maya started keeping a physical journal, documenting everything in her careful handwriting. She gave it to me to hide at my friend Kathy's house after Marcos made a comment at Sunday dinner about how cloud storage isn't as secure as people think. The way he'd looked at Maya when he said it made it clear the message was for her. We tried the women's shelter downtown, hoping they could help with the custody threat. The intake counselor listened sympathetically, but explained that without a police report or court order, they couldn't intervene in what appeared to be a custody dispute. The system only recognized certain types of danger. Maya's situation, the grooming, the RP, the ongoing threats, didn't fit their checkboxes. Going through old photos became an obsession. I spent hours on Instagram, searching through tags from family events. The pattern emerged slowly but undeniably. Every Christmas, every birthday, every celebration. Marcos positioned near the teenage girls, his hand on a shoulder here, standing too close there. And always, Jackie conveniently hammered or absent when he made his moves. Jana's mom reached out after Stephanie mentioned we'd been asking about the quinceañera. She'd always wondered why Maya left so early that night, especially since Maya had been helping with decorations and seemed excited about the party. She mentioned finding Maya's bracelet, the one our grandmother had given her, in the hotel hallway near Marcos's room the next morning. She'd meant to return it but forgot in the post-party chaos. The family group chat exploded when Jackie shared her concerns about my troubling behavior. She'd compiled a list, visiting dangerous areas, associating with unstable individuals, showing signs of rebellion. Grandma demanded an immediate family meeting. The messages poured in, each relative adding their own observations about my recent changes. Uncle Tony mentioned I'd seemed distant at his birthday dinner. Aunt Carmen noted I'd been defensive about Maya. I found Maya at the 24-hour laundromat near the highway at midnight. It was the only place she felt safe meeting anymore. Public enough to prevent confrontation, empty enough to talk. She'd been sleeping in her car for 3 nights, too scared to stay anywhere Marcos might know about. Her son was with her mother, but she couldn't risk leading Marcos there. She showed me the birth certificate again, pointing to where she'd listed the father as unknown. It had been the only way to protect her son from custody claims, but now Marcos was using it against her. His friend from the quinceañera, the one who'd taken all those conveniently timed photos, had started threatening to claim paternity. The friend who'd been in just the right places to provide Marcos an alibi. Aunt Carmen cornered me at the grocery store, mentioning how strange it was that Marcos had always volunteered to drive Maya to family events when she was younger. She said it casually, like she was just remembering, but I could see something shifting in her expression, the pieces starting to connect in her mind, years too late. I started going through every family photo I could find, creating a timeline on my laptop. The pattern was undeniable once you looked for it. Marcos at Maya's middle school graduation, his arm around her waist. Marcos at her quinceañera, dancing too close. Marcos at every family gathering, always finding reasons to be near her. And in every photo, Maya's body language screamed discomfort. Arms crossed, leaning away, forced smiles that never reached her eyes. Stephanie reached out with more memories from high school. She'd been thinking about the night Maya changed, really thinking about it. How Maya had been excited about Jana's party for weeks, then suddenly went quiet afterward. How she'd stopped wearing the clothes she loved, started covering up even in summer. How she'd quit the dance team even though she was captain. All the signs they'd missed because no one wanted to see them. Dad mentioned at dinner that Marcos had offered to sponsor my college applications through his company. Such a generous offer, he said, especially since Maya had wasted her opportunities. I watched Mom's face carefully as he spoke. Something flickered there, not quite doubt, but the beginning of questions she didn't want to ask. Stephanie remembered something else. The night of the quinceañera, she'd found Maya crying in the hotel bathroom. Maya wouldn't say what was wrong, just kept washing her hands over and over. Then Jackie had burst in, hammered and laughing, dragging Maya away before Stephanie could help. Jackie had said something about Maya being dramatic, needing to lighten up. Stephanie had believed her because why wouldn't she? Jackie was the responsible adult. Uncle Tony called me aside after family dinner, wanting to know why I was stirring up drama. He reminded me how generous Marcos had been to the family, helping with loans, recommending jobs, being there when people needed support. The implication was clear, rock the boat, and that support might disappear. I wondered how many others were thinking the same thing but not saying saying it. Maya wrote everything down in her journal with meticulous detail. Every threat, every message, every encounter. She wrote about the night at Jana's quinceañera, though her hand shook so badly the words were barely legible. I read it once, then had to step outside to throw up. The clinical way she described it, like she was documenting evidence, not reliving trauma, made it worse somehow. Ms. Kim pulled me aside after class, noticing I'd been distracted. I tested the waters with a hypothetical question about a friend in trouble. She listened without pushing, then said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones who fail us most. She left her door open, literally and figuratively. The grocery store encounter happened on a Tuesday. I was buying supplies for Maya when I overheard Marcos talking to a clerk. She'd mentioned his wife seemed tired lately, probably meaning it as small talk. His mask slipped for just a second, a flash of real anger before the smile returned. He thanked her coldly and left. I realized then how much energy he spent maintaining his image. Maya got another message from Marcos about his friend claiming paternity. She could make this all go away, he suggested. Just stay quiet, move away, never contact the family again. In exchange, he'd make sure his friend didn't pursue custody. The threat was clear: comply or lose your son. Maya refused, knowing it would only be the beginning of his demands. Mom started asking questions about Jackie's investment in Maya's case. Why was she so concerned about a cousin she'd barely spoken to in years? Why was she calling Emma's friend's parents? I could see the wheels turning, remembering how Maya had been such a sweet, responsible girl before she got pregnant. The timeline that didn't quite make sense if you really thought about it. I spent an entire night analyzing the timeline with Stephanie. Maya had been 15 at the quinceañera. The party was in April. Her son was born the following January. The math was undeniable. But more than that, we traced the grooming pattern. Marcos had started when Maya was 13. Little comments about how pretty she was getting. Special attention at family gatherings. Always volunteering to help with her school projects. The company picnic photos Stephanie found were revealing. Marcos's co-workers clearly avoided him, creating subtle distance in group photos. Their wives kept their daughters away from him. Professional courtesy maintained, but personal boundaries firmly established. They knew. Maybe not the specifics, but they knew something was off. Maya found her old diary while packing. The entry from right before she got pregnant made me sick. Marcos had threatened to hurt her little brother if she told anyone what he'd been doing. She'd written it in code, thinking she was being careful, but reading it now, the meaning was clear. All those years of silence bought with threats against the people she loved. Mom chose to believe me. It happened gradually, then all at once. She'd been adding up the inconsistencies, the timeline that didn't make sense, Maya's drastic personality change. When she finally said she'd support whatever I thought was right, I almost cried. The relief of having just one parent on my side felt like breathing again. She admitted she'd had feelings about Marcos for years, but ignored them for family harmony. The way he looked at teenage cousins, how he always volunteered to drive them places, the jokes that weren't quite jokes. She'd pushed down her instincts because Jackie was family, because Marcos was successful, because it was easier than acknowledging the truth. Maya suggested something desperate one night, planting substances in Marcos's car, getting him arrested, removing him from the equation. I refused immediately. We had to win clean or not at all. Using his tactics would only give him ammunition against us. Maya nodded, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. A mother willing to do anything to protect her child. The family dinner confrontation happened by accident. Marcos had been drinking, started talking about ungrateful women who didn't appreciate good men. He mentioned Maya specifically, claiming she'd seduced him, thrown herself at him, but he slipped, mentioned details about that night at the quinceañera that only someone who'd been there would know. The color drained from Jackie's face as he spoke. Maya's friend from college who was studying law helped her create formal documentation, not for court. The statute of limitations and lack of physical evidence made that impossible, but for her own records, creating a paper trail that might protect her son someday. Each page carefully dated, witnessed, notarized, building a wall of truth against future lies. Jackie's brother pulled me aside at a family barbecue. He'd noticed his sister's marriage had been struggling. She'd been drinking more, taking pills to sleep. He wondered if I knew anything about what was going on. I stayed silent, but I could see him putting pieces together. The timing of her increased drinking, the way she avoided being alone with her husband. Family members started reaching out privately, sharing observations they'd dismissed for years. Marcos's inappropriate interest in teenage cousins at pool parties. Comments that made them uncomfortable but not quite uncomfortable enough to speak up. Always explained away, always excused. The pattern only visible when you stepped back and looked at the whole picture. Mom leveraged her medical practice connections to find a trauma counselor who would see Maya pro bono. Dr. Catherine specialized in cases the system failed. She understood that healing happened outside official channels sometimes. Maya started sessions immediately, learning to process trauma she'd been carrying alone for years. The parking garage confrontation was caught on security camera. Maya had tried to talk to Marcos about stopping the harassment. He'd grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises, snarling threats about taking her son. The footage was grainy but clear enough to show his aggression. Another piece of evidence for Maya's growing file. Aunt Carmen apologized to me privately at a family gathering. She admitted she'd been jealous of Maya's potential. The valedictorian headed for Harvard while Carmen's own kids struggled in community college. She'd let that jealousy cloud her judgment, made her cruel when Maya needed support. The apology came years too late, but at least it came. Word spread through whisper networks the way it always does. Other parents started keeping their daughters away from Marcos at family events. Excuses were made, scheduling conflicts, other commitments, but the pattern was clear. The community was protecting itself in the only way it could when the system wouldn't help. Jackie's sister, the family court judge, announced she was recusing herself from anything involving Marcos. She cited potential conflicts, but the discomfort in her voice suggested deeper knowledge. Another pillar of his protection network crumbling. He was losing the institutional power he'd relied on to silence victims. I created protective networks at family gatherings without being explicit, always ensuring younger cousins weren't alone with Marcos, creating interruptions when he tried to corner them. Other women women started following my lead, an unspoken agreement to protect the vulnerable. We couldn't remove him, but we could limit his access. Mom joined forces with Stephanie's mom and Ms. Kim to create a support system for Maya. They took turns checking on her, bringing groceries, watching her son. A quiet network of women who understood that sometimes justice came from community care rather than courtrooms. Maya was never alone anymore, never without backup. Marcos's intimidation tactics failed against the collective protection. He'd text Maya threats, only to find she was surrounded by supporters. He'd show up at her new apartment, only to discover a rotation of study groups that never left her isolated. His frustration grew with each failed attempt to regain control. Grandma watched it happen at her birthday party, Marcos cornering our youngest cousin, offering to drive her home. Maya stepped in smoothly, mentioning she was headed that direction anyway. The look that passed between them, his fury, her calm defiance, told Grandma everything. I saw understanding dawn in her eyes, followed by a grief so deep it made her reach for her oxygen tank. Family members started forgetting to invite Marcos to events. Not officially, that would require confrontation, but somehow he'd missed the group text about location changes. Jackie would show up alone, making excuses about work commitments. The family was excising him slowly, carefully, without acknowledging what they were doing. Maya's therapist provided dated session notes documenting trauma consistent with RP. The timeline matched perfectly with her pregnancy. Clinical documentation that validated what Maya had been saying all along. Another brick in the wall of evidence she was building, not for court, but for survival. Jackie's sister made her position clearer, announcing she was recusing herself from any cases involving family members. The protection network Marcos had relied on was dissolving. Without Jackie's connections in law enforcement and her sister's influence in family court, his threats carried less weight. The Korean BBQ dinner became a turning point. Our teenage cousin firmly rejected Marcos's offer to drive her home, saying her mom was already coming. His mask slipped completely, face contorting with rage before he caught himself, but we'd all seen it. The careful image he'd maintained for years cracking in public. Maya's focus shifted to protecting her son's future. She realized he would eventually ask about his father. The truth would be devastating, but lies would be worse. She started working with her therapist on how to eventually tell him in age-appropriate ways. The goal was raising him to understand consent and respect in ways our family had failed to teach. School rumors started spreading about my family situation. I handled them by staying calm, not oversharing, but not denying the basic truth. I was supporting a family member through a difficult time. My consistency and refusal to provide drama actually earned respect from classmates who'd expected gossip. The extended family group chat went silent after Mom posted a simple question about why Maya would lie about something that had cost her everything. No one had an answer that made sense. The silence spoke volumes. Doubt was creeping in, even among those who wanted to maintain the status quo. Truth spread like water finding cracks. Family members connected dots they'd ignored for years. Marcos's controlling behavior toward Jackie, her increasing absence from family events, Maya's drastic personality change after the quinceañera. The pattern was undeniable once people stopped refusing to see it. Small victories accumulated. Maya received an invitation to Korean New Year celebration, the first family event she'd been welcomed to in years. The tension was palpable, but the invitation itself was progress. The family was slowly accepting that excluding Maya had been wrong, even if they weren't ready to confront why. Marcos tried a new tactic, filing a false CPS report about Maya's mental health. He used his remaining connections to flag her as unstable, a danger to her child. But Maya had been building her own documentation, therapy records, character references, proof of stable housing and income. The investigation found nothing concerning. Maya's mother had been carrying guilt for years about not protecting her daughter. When Marcos tried contacting her directly with threats, she responded with fury that surprised everyone. She told him never to contact them again, that she'd call the police if he came near her property. The mother bear had finally awakened. His employer quietly transferred Marcos to a different department after multiple women reported feeling uncomfortable around him. Nothing official, no formal complaints that would damage his record, just a lateral move that removed him from positions where he'd interact with young female employees. The Whisper Network had reached his workplace. Maya's support network solidified into something beautiful. She was invited to baby showers, included in family photos, asked for parenting advice. The same cousins who'd shunned her now sought her wisdom. Not everyone, some relatives remained cold, but enough to show that healing was possible. 3 of Jackie's detective colleagues' wives reached out to Maya privately. They'd been watching Marcos for years, keeping their daughters away from him at department events. They'd seen the patterns, recognized the predator behavior, but without proof, without victims willing to speak up, they'd only been able to protect their own. I compiled everything into a comprehensive timeline. Every photo, every message, every witness statement. The pattern of grooming and assault became undeniable when laid out chronologically. I shared it with immediate family first, watching as the full scope of Marcos's actions became clear. Years of predation hidden in plain sight. Jackie found the folder by accident while looking for tax documents. Photos of Maya from when she was 13, 14, 15. Pictures Marcos had taken at family events, zoomed in on her developing body. Jackie's hands shook as she flipped through them, seeing her husband's obsession documented in horrible clarity. She knew then that everything Maya had said was true. Jackie's discovery triggered everything. She confronted Marcos that night at their house. Her detective training finally turned toward the truth she'd avoided for years. I heard about it from Stephanie's mom, who lived next door and witnessed Marcos storming out with suitcases at 2 a.m. Jackie changed the locks immediately. The family meeting happened 3 days later at Grandma's house. Marcos wasn't invited. Maya sat between me and Mom, her hands steady as she faced the relatives who'd shunned her for years. Jackie stood up first, admitting she'd known something was wrong but chose denial over protecting Maya. Her voice broke as she described finding the photos, realizing her husband had been hunting at family events while she drank herself unconscious. Uncle Tony tried deflecting, suggesting we handle this privately to avoid scandal. Maya's response response was to pull out her documentation. Every threat, every message, every piece of evidence she'd collected. She spread them across Grandma's dining table, the same table where they'd voted to ban her months ago. The room went silent as family members read through years of grooming and threats. Aunt Carmen broke down completely, remembering how she'd mocked Maya for getting pregnant, never questioning the timeline. She tried apologizing, but Maya just nodded, focused on ensuring everyone understood the pattern. This wasn't about forgiveness yet, it was about protection. The younger cousins were sent outside while adults discussed next steps. Some relatives still wanted to minimize, suggesting Marcos just needed therapy. Mom shut that down immediately, pointing out he'd threatened to burn down Maya's mother's house. This wasn't a troubled man needing help. This was a predator who'd operated freely for years. Jackie revealed she'd already filed for divorce and was cooperating with an internal investigation at her department. 3 other families had come forward with concerns about Marcos's behavior at police functions. Her career was likely over, but she seemed relieved to finally stop protecting him. I watched Maya during the meeting, saw how she kept checking her phone. Her son was with her mother, surrounded by the Korean church ladies who'd formed a protective circle. Even here, explaining her trauma to family who should have protected her, she was thinking about his safety first. The family split predictably. Grandma, Mom, Jackie, Stephanie's family, and a handful of cousins sided with Maya completely. Others hedged, admitting Marcos was problematic but uncomfortable with full ostracization. Uncle Tony and his branch left early, muttering about overreactions. The divide was clean. Those who believed victims and those who preferred comfortable lies. Marcos tried one last manipulation. He showed up at Maya's son's daycare, claiming to be a family friend picking up the child. The director, already alert from the previous harassment, called police while teachers kept him in the office under pretense of paperwork. He left before officers arrived, but the attempt was documented. That pushed even fence sitters to action. Threatening Maya was one thing. Attempting to take her child crossed a line even conflict-averse relatives couldn't ignore. The final family members who'd been hedging chose their side. Marcos had overplayed his hand. Maya filed for a restraining order with all her documentation. The judge, reviewing years of threats and the daycare incident, granted it immediately. It was just paper, but it was something. Legal acknowledgement that Marcos was dangerous, that Maya's fears were valid. The Whisper network expanded beyond family. Marcos's photo circulated quietly among parent groups, school volunteers, youth sports organizers. Not publicly, that would invite lawsuits, but quietly, parent to parent, protecting children through community awareness. He found himself unwelcome at places he'd never expect to be noticed. Jackie moved in with her brother temporarily, starting intensive therapy to process her enabling. She sent Maya a letter taking full responsibility, promising to testify if needed, offering financial support for therapy and legal costs. Maya didn't respond immediately, but she kept the letter. I started my senior year with everything different. Some friends' parents still forbade contact, poisoned by Jackie's earlier calls, but others reached out, having heard the real story through their own networks. My chemistry teacher, Ms. Kim, became an unofficial mentor, helping me process the trauma of discovering family secrets. Maya's custody situation stabilized. Without Marcos's threats and with strong community support documented, CPS closed their investigation. The daycare director wrote a glowing letter about Maya's parenting. Dr. Catherine provided records showing Maya's emotional stability. The system that had been weaponized against her slowly became neutral. Marcos's workplace situation deteriorated. The quiet transfer hadn't satisfied growing concerns. More women came forward about uncomfortable encounters. Nothing fireable, he was too careful for that, but enough to make his position untenable. He started job hunting, finding doors mysteriously closed at companies where Whisper networks reached.